All right,
Thank you.
I'd like to call to order the Riviera Beach Community Redevelopment Agency meeting on May 20th. The special meeting, the time is 5 o'clock. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Lanier, Commissioner Miller Anderson,
Present.
Commissioner McCoy,
Here.
Vice Chair Lawson,
Here.
Chair Botel,
Here.
Scott Evans,
Here.
Michael Haygood,
Here.
also present Tamara Sagan, CRA Clerk.
Thank you. Could we have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Lawson?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any member of the public wishing to comment publicly on any matter, including items on the agenda, shall submit their comments by email to Riviera Beach CRA Clerk Tamara Sagan at publiccomments@rbcra.com. That's public comments, plural, at rbcra.com. The email shall contain the applicable agenda items, numbers, along with the precise wording to be read into the record. Explicit language will not be read. Email is if it is without applicable agenda item numbers, will be read under the general public comment section. Please be advised public comments will be accepted for each applicable item and the general public comment section until closure is announced by the chairperson or the RBCRA clerk. All email addresses and submitted comments are and will be public record. The Riviera Beach CRA clerk or designee will read public comments into the record at the appropriate time for no more than 3 minutes. Do we have any additions or deletions by any commissioners or staff? Do we have any disclosure by commissioners or staff, commissioners? No. Could I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lawson,
Yes.
Chair Botel,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. We don't have a consent agenda this evening, so we will move to the regular agenda. We don't have any items tabled. I've already read the public comments statement. So if we could go to item 1, Madam Clerk.
A resolution of the Board of Commissioners of the Riviera Beach Community Redevelopment Agency approving and adopting the Riviera Beach Community Redevelopment Agency COVID-19 Small Business Forgivable Loan Fund, authorizing staff to advertise and solicit applicants for the program, providing an effective date. The acceptance of public comment cards is now closed.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Do a second? Thank you. Discussion, Mr. Evans.
Good evening. This program will provide up to $5,000 for immediate assistance to local business located in the CRA. If it's approved tonight, we'll be able to quickly expedite the program, advertise it, place it on our website very quickly, and make it available to businesses in an expedited manner. And then we'll also forward the approved program over to the city for consideration under their small business program. And Anita Jenkins, our Director of Neighborhood Services, will present the details.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans, and thank you, Chair and Commissioners. This is our Small Business Loan Program and Fund, and we wanted to bring something before you where we could address the negative effects of our small businesses within the CRA. With the recent COVID-19 pandemic, a number of our businesses have suffered substantial financial loss, and due to adverse economic conditions, due to high unemployment, etc. And with this program, we can provide some relief to our businesses in a very short time frame. The criteria is very straightforward and it's laid out in the memo, and we've attached the full program guidelines, application, and documentation. For instance, a loan applicant must be a business that was or becomes operational, evidenced by a business tax receipt. The loan applicant must be a business entity named in the corporate documents, and it must be executed by the principal owners named on the corporate documents. It must be a for-profit entity, privately held, or sole proprietorship with less than 25 employees. And we know that a number of our businesses within the CRA have less than 25 employees. If it is a sole proprietor, then they cannot use more than 50% of $2,500 of the loan towards payroll expenses. It must be located within the CRA area, and we've attached a map to the application package to clearly delineate that. And businesses operating within the Riviera Beach Marina are eligible to apply, but not for the same type of assistance, if you could recall, that we gave them last week. The business must provide proof that it is properly licensed by all necessary levels of government and professional associations or agencies. And if a principal owner has more than one business, they can only apply for one business through this program. The loan terms are that the loan will be interest-free, and the loan amount will be due to be repaid 1 year from the time on the date of the loan. If the business provides proper documentation, then the loan is forgivable and becomes a grant. From a budgetary standpoint, this program is funded from an existing line item where we are proposing to reprogram funds from a property acquisition line item in the amount of $125,000. And with that, we're asking for the commission, for you all to approve the small business loan program and fund in the amount of $125,000. And with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions or comments.
Yes, Mr. McCoy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Jenkins, thank you for bringing this forward so quickly. I think I just found the bullet point, but you mentioned the word marina. You said, can you repeat what you said relative to the marina?
We have tenants who operate out of the marina, and they would be eligible to apply for this assistance for payroll, for utilities, et cetera, if they have any. They would not be excluded from the program.
Well, my personal opinion is I don't think that that's what I was hoping to see, being that we've given some economic relief to those businesses at the marina already. And I would definitely not like to see them come back, because we've given them 4 months of rent expense paid, and now to see one of them apply would kind of, be repetitive. And I think there's probably other businesses, that could be eligible. That was the first point I wanted to ask. And if you'll answer that question, and then I can grab my other notes. And do you have a response to that, Ms. Jenkins?
Well, it's a decision of the commission. It's something that's, as staff, we're proposing that they be eligible. It's just that with the information that we're receiving globally and throughout our community, we know that businesses have more impact than we have dollars to assist. And that was our thinking. But it is clearly a commission decision as to whether or not those businesses who will receive relief from their rent payments for 4 months will be eligible or not.
Ms. Jenkins, if you had to estimate, do you know how many businesses we have in the CRA?
I could not give you a number. I know that it's more than 50. We have close to that in our Business Watch program, and it would depend on how you classify the business. With those who have 25 and less of employees, I think that would be the vast majority of our businesses.
Okay. The other specific type of business I noticed that were disallowed was, I thought I see massage or something like that. Massage and personal services. So, so you technically can get a massage at a spa that does nails and that sort of thing. And what's the reasoning there for massages? Because I know of at least one that's in the CRA. I don't know if I don't know if they're registered, but I know of one.
I will tell you that we were following the typical businesses that were allowed support from county programs, from the federal programs, et cetera. And that's clearly a call of the commission if you'd like to add massage parlors onto the acceptable list.
Well, it seems a little, I guess, ambiguous because I'm looking at page 4, and the verbiage says the type of businesses eligible to receive funding include, and it gives a list, but are not limited to. So those that aren't explicitly called out in this criteria and application process, who makes that decision as to the not limited to? Is that a staff or staff decision, a management decision at the CRA?
If this program is approved as is, then the ultimate decision of what might be included in the et cetera, but are not limited to, would be left to management. There is a specific list of businesses that are ineligible, and I would ask Mr. Haygood to opine in terms of how we would distinguish those. But of course, it's up to the commission in terms of which businesses are included or excluded.
Though we did not go into detail as far as, say, an appeal, we did provide that ultimately the board of commissioners would decide if someone applied and they were denied. I think the thinking is ultimately they could bring it to the board and ask for your guidance, and ultimately it's your decision. Quite frankly, the businesses that were excluded, I guess you could say, we really looked at some other programs, and to the extent that the board wanted to change the ones that either include or exclude, it is your call.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haygood. So if I can move away from the type of businesses, I do have a question. So the last part, and I haven't found it yet in the application that you mentioned, that if they're unable to pay, they would need to submit some sort of documentation. What exactly is that? So that we now change that loan into a forgivable loan or a grant.
Well, for the application, and let me get to the page and I'll tell you, there's a checklist. On page 5 of the application packet, there is a list of things that the business must present in order to be considered for the money. And under number 3 on that list, after they submit their corporate documents and their licenses or business tax receipts, if they're applying for payroll, for instance, then they have to present some reasonable documentation of payroll, what it is historically, et cetera, and some statement about the loss that they've incurred. If they are presenting money for utility bills, it will be a copy of the utility bill. They would sign a promissory note, which hopes to hold them accountable, and so that we can be accountable for the money that we lend. Within a year, they have to present documentation of how the money was used. And it would be the same sort of documentation. If you were able to continue to employ staff, then it would be payroll records for that period. It would be utility bills. If they present those, that documentation within the year, then the loan becomes a forgivable grant. There is no repayment.
Anything else, Mr. McCoy, or shall I?
Yes. So I don't see any language that speaks to any penalties of perjury or certification similar to other programs, similar to other requirements in other programs. Is that not there for some reason?
Yes, no, it's here. There is on page 11, there's a certification and waiver policy where it lays out the certification where the applicant is attesting to the truth of the documentation, that they understand that they could be penalized or fined or imprisoned for making false statements, etc. So there's a certification statement there. And there are requirements throughout the document where the owner or principals of the company have to be the ones who are signing. They have to have the authority to sign on behalf of the agency. And then there is a promissory note which lays out further certifications, attestations, etc., and acknowledgments, and it has to be signed by that person. I think there's a requirement in here with the certifications that the signatures must be notarized. But throughout the packet, all of the documents, yes, on page 15, there's a requirement that the business owner's signature must be notarized. So we try to make this as simple but accountable as possible. And I would just defer to Mr. Haygood if he had anything additional he could add to that. But it is included in the application packet.
I guess the biggest determinant is that if in fact you're not truthful, then it's a promissory note that we can call the funds back. There's no civil penalties, there's no jail time, anything of that nature, no criminal penalties.
Well, that's not what it says here, but there should be. I don't want anybody to present false. It's a criminal offense to present false information to secure a loan. Is it not, Mr. Haygood?
Well, I don't do criminal work, so no, sir, I wouldn't be able to answer. But the civil penalties that we were looking to was to actually go against, you would have to pay the funds back.
Okay, I see there's some, I guess, some small things that have to be taken care of in the application. Just this last question. Is there a personal guarantor required for these businesses? Or is it solely the responsibility of the business? And that's all I end with that, Madam Chair. That question.
I think the promissory note requires, the application requires the person who's signing who's personally liable. I don't think it's against the corporation.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Ms. Haygood?
I said, I think the way it is written, and I'd have to look at it real closely, it's the person who was actually signing, rather than a personal guarantee, the money is being loaned to the individual, not to the company.
Mr. McCoy, could I just call on?
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller Anderson, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Haygood, do you not look at these documents before they come before us for legal sufficiency?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, I drafted it and they were then revised. Yes, but I did the initial draft.
But you're not sure about the question that Mr. McCoy had? You said you have to look at it?
Well, I'll look at it and give you an answer. But yes, I did draft them. But again, I think the loan is to the individual. I'll confirm that, not to the company.
I'm thinking that, is that how it's typically done? Because I would think it falls up under the company, the organization itself, right?
No, the way this was drafted, and I must tell you that we used what we thought was a good format that was used by the Boynton Beach Redevelopment Agency. So we just made some modifications to it, but the basic format is the program from Boynton, which seems to be very successful.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I don't know if the other people that came in late were recognized.
I was just about to do that. Thank you very much. Could the record show that Commissioner Lanier has joined the meeting for quite some time, actually? Thank you, Ms. Lanier. I think Mr. Lawson had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Jenkins, what strategies are we putting in place to market this program to our local businesses?
We intend, once this program is approved, we are prepared and standing by to do what I call a complete push out. When we go to the public, that would include, number one, posting to our website. It would include getting a list of people who have business tax receipts within the CRA that we would send it directly to them. We would share this with our Business Watch membership list. We would send it to the tenants who are at the marina. We would send it out by Constant Contact, which has thousands of contacts, but it would reach our business community. We post it on TV18. We would post it on the city's website. We would post it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. We also make hard copies available that if someone called the office, we have a box outside of our door that they could come in the building and pick it up. We'd make hard copies available to our ambassadors. You're going up and down Broadway through Heron, President Barack Obama, they would be able to stop in, knock on the door, and leave a plastic door hanger bag with our businesses within the CRA. We make every effort to get it out to our business community.
So that was going to be kind of my approach, the guerrilla marketing technique, because it could also help promote that ambassador program as well and get them acclimated to the local businesses. So if we could really lean on that and having them go door to door, knocking on the businesses' doors, leaving that information with the local businesses in the CRA, that will let them know we're here to help them, and we actually have a program that's going to work and kind of benefit them. So whoever's currently open, if those ambassadors could really utilize that program as well to get to each resident, because like you said, I think there's only about 50 or 60 businesses in that CRA district, if not more, that would qualify for this program. So I think we can touch every door personally.
Yes, most definitely. We'll take that suggestion and make sure it happens.
Yeah, I really like the personal touch, because I want us to get hands-on when it comes to issuing this money, because these residents, these businesses need it. So if we can get to those doors and have those ambassadors greet with them and meet with them, and that'd be a good approach, a good personal touch.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Lanier? Your mic, Shirley. There you go.
Okay. I just wanted to say that speaking with the CRA director and the staff from the city of Boynton Beach in reviewing this document, one of the things that we talked about was to Mr. McCoy's point. I think that the attorney needs to make sure that these documents say that the loan should be to the business with a personal guarantee and not to a individual. So however that needs to look in these documents, that's the way it needs to look, because that was one of the conversations that I had with Boynton, was that they did not beef that up enough in terms of making clear that the loan is to the business with a personal guarantee. So that needs to reflect in our documents as well. And also with the city of Boynton, they did not have on their list home-based businesses, nor did they have home daycares. And I think that those two, with the permission of my colleagues, should be added to that list.
Thank you. I have a question, a couple of questions. Who will the selection committee be if we get more than, I anticipate that we would get more than 25 applicants. And in that case, who will the selection committee be?
I don't anticipate that we'll need one. It's first come, first serve, first ready.
Okay, so you're going to cut it off at 25. And
yes.
Is there a cutoff date? Are we going to leave this open for a month or so and then say, okay, or we're just going to wait till we get 25?
We didn't anticipate putting a cutoff date. I think as the applications come in, we could push the money out until the money is gone. It's what staff is proposing. And
okay, so
yes, ma'am.
They'll get it right away. There won't be any delay. Great.
And we've already talked to Mr. Randy Sherman in finance about helping us to expedite the processing of the payments as quickly as possible. And you'll notice in the packet that we've also included the vendor registration form as well as an electronic funds transfer authorization, so we could make sure that either the check or the EFTs would be processed in the most expeditious manner. And just to answer your question, Mr. McCoy and Michael, I'll point you to it so you could explain a little further. The application requires that the loan is in the name of the business, and there has to be corporate documentation, et cetera, for the business. And the promissory note says that if you go to the third paragraph, and maybe Michael, you could explain here that the documentation and that the loan recipient is the one that would repay the money or be obligated. So if it's in the name of the business, the loan recipient and the person who's signing as the principal, I think would be obligating the business. It would not go to anybody on a personal basis.
In that case, in keeping with Mr. McCoy's comment, and I guess Ms. Lanier's to an extent, then you would need a personal guarantee if you were going to be able to go against an individual, as opposed to going against the business. It gives you some protection in the sense that you have individuals guaranteeing it as opposed to a corporate entity.
So commissioners, with that, if you all approve it tonight, Mr. Haygood will make sure that the personal guarantee form is included in the packet.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McCoy, you
I'll
recognize?
defer. Thank you. I'll defer.
Mr. Lawson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How quickly will this program be approved? If we approve this today, how quickly will funds be in business owners' hands? Is my first question. And then the second question is, I think Councilwoman Lanier mentioned possibly opening it up to at-home businesses. I actually would not be in support of that because I just know that the brick and mortars that have the overhead, that have the staff, that have the utilities in these brick and mortars here is going to far exceed the 25 applicants. So I would want to just restrict it to the locations that are actually retail based or brick and mortar in the CRA and not the home businesses in the CRA would be my opinion in reference to that.
Thank you. Any other, Ms.
Well,
Lanier
I was
and then
actually-
Mr. Mc.
I was looking for an answer from staff in reference to how quickly money would be in the hands of businesses.
We're prepared, if this is approved, with the modification of adding the personal guarantee and any other tweaks that you have. We think we could post the notice and the application tomorrow afternoon. And as quickly as applications come in, Mr. Sherman has told us that while the city is processing checks every 2 weeks, he would do whatever he could to expedite that process and get funds out as quickly as possible. So it would depend upon the city's finance.
Okay, follow up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So in reference to the funds going out, are we waiting till we receive all 25 applicants to process, or will we be processing as they're received?
Staff is proposing to process them as we receive them. First come, first serve, first ready.
Okay. Okay, and then the last comment, I mentioned the at-home businesses, but now that I'm thinking about the at-home daycares, it's a conflict because I want to make sure we support the retail brick and mortars in our CRA district, but I do know that we have a few home daycares that are licensed in our CRA district as well. So, but I just don't want the registered home businesses and all of them to suffice. So I really would be supportive of just being retail brick and mortars in the CRA district.
Thank you, Ms. Lanier, and then Ms. Miller Anderson. Mr. McCoy, did you give up your spot? Then I'll go to you first, and then Lanier, then Miller Anderson.
No, I just wanted to say that the reason why I wanted to include home-based businesses and to include home-based daycares is that many of those daycares have had to close because of the COVID-19. City of Riviera Beach is filled with home-based businesses and with mom and pop locations in their homes. So I would like to at least suggest that we set aside a percentage of these funds for those types of businesses because they don't have the staff to be able to submit applications. They don't have the people to be able to get the documents in place that regular brick and mortar places do. So I just don't want to forget that there are numerous daycares and home-based businesses in this city that could benefit from this as well.
So are you recommending a portion of this money be set aside for that type and perhaps a smaller amount of the loan, or what? Can you flesh out
Well,
your thinking on that a little bit?
I'm thinking of at least a third of the funding be set aside for home-based businesses, for mom and pops that are in this city that do business out of their houses. They have, you have to have the same documentation that everybody else has to have. Business tax receipts. You have to be, registered in the state of Florida. You have to have a business license. You have to have exactly the same thing that is required of other businesses. So it won't be any differences in how the application is submitted. It'll just be the fact that we know that mom and pop businesses do not have the staff to be able to compete. Because if you open this up tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock, at 4:15, it is done. Well, the city of Boynton said when they opened this up at 10 a.m. by 10:20, and they had $500,000, and they were giving 25,000 to each individual, and that was done in 18 minutes. So if this money is not set aside for small home-based mom and pop businesses, especially daycares, then they will not be able to compete.
Can I get a sense from the rest of the commission how they feel about separating out some funding, Mr. McCoy?
Well, I wanted to make my comments. That was part of my comments.
I know you, I'm sorry, Ms. Miller Anderson, Mr. McCoy gave up his ability to speak in favor of Mr. Lawson a few minutes ago, so I said I would pick him up and then you'll be next.
Okay,
Sorry.
well, my comment was going to be regarding what Ms. Lanier was saying, so
go ahead,
I can wait until then. I'll wait until
Okay,
then.
thank you. Mr. McCoy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have quite a few comments, and even about Ms. Lanier. So I don't know if I want to do a set aside allocation because we don't even know how many that's in the CRA at this point, unless we know the specifics. But I don't think. And let me start over. I don't want to have a set aside for home daycares. I think we should just outright allow home daycares instead of setting a certain allocation for a specific type of business. I don't believe that is. Quite honestly, I don't think that that's fair. I mean, if we allow it, we allow it. But to set aside a certain amount of funding, suppose they don't even come in and can't even fulfill the requirements. Now we have to meet back and convene as a board just to figure out how we reallocate that money back into, I guess, the general fund. So if I'm okay with them being involved or being a part of the included businesses, but to set aside a certain amount, you basically giving preference to a certain business more so than the other one. So I have a question though. Ms. Jenkins, what did we determine about rent? Because I don't know if I've seen that in there.
We did not include rent as an eligible expense, but that's a call for the commission. If you'd like to add rent in, we could. We could very easily modify the application and still be able to get it out tomorrow if you wanted to add rent, but it is not included.
Okay. So I'm a little concerned because I'm looking at this application, and on page 5, there's verbiage that says that loan applicants may redact sensitive information such as employee names, addresses, identification numbers, etc. But then on page 11, there's a waiver of privacy. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how we validate any kind of, if we were to forgive these loans, how do we validate that these are in fact true expenses, that this tax return that this person is presenting or this IRS 941 quarterly payroll taxes does in fact belong to this business, I don't understand how we can give the applicant the ability to redact and then come here in page 11 and say that they waive their privacy. I don't think that there should be any redactions because you're going to get put in a situation where all you have is documents that you can't verify against any other source. And I think if you do that, then completely, there's no real validation for the purposes of forgiveness. So that's actually a question.
Mr. McCoy, some of the information that I think was identified as like privacy information, social security numbers, things of that nature. We want to obviously make sure that we can support what in fact they've paid. But just because you're redacting the employee's name doesn't mean that you don't have to present evidence that you were paying somebody.
Well, let me go ahead and tell you, I disagree. We don't have any underwriting criteria. We're not basing this on a credit score.
No, sir.
All we're asking for is specific documentation. Now, as the program administrators, Mr. Evans and his staff have the ability to keep that information private. And if there's a public records request, obviously it has to be redacted before it's given to the public. But I don't understand under no reason how we can actually validate someone's personal information or business information or even the employees. In fact, if they had employees, if we don't even have the employees' names or we don't have the real EIN number of the business, because it actually speaks and says specifically on page 5, it says, which I just can't figure that out. It says, applicants may redact sensitive information such as employee names, addresses, identification numbers. So I don't know, and that's not very clear on what that means.
ID numbers, I think, are social security numbers.
It would be ID numbers for the employees, not for the business, because the application requires a federal ID number for the business.
Okay, I can understand that you would redact the employee's social security number, but to say you don't want to put the employee's name on it, if you just Google Paycheck Protection Program, and you will see the top 4 cases of the fraudulent cases that the Department of Justice had issued indictments over have been all around employees, all around organizations said they had X number of employees, which ultimately they did not have. And I mean, from the risk factor, I want to help people, but I don't want to give anybody a pass to come and just pass anything off on the city with the expectation that they're going to get a loan. I just can't agree in good conscience because that's not being good stewards of taxpayers' dollars. And in fact, if we don't put these measures in place, we're just setting this up to be an all-out grant altogether with truly what I believe is no intention on actually collecting. But there's no way that there should be a situation where a person says that they have 20 employees and they work at I'm just saying, for example, say at an automobile repair shop, and we don't have any obligation or even desire to verify that these employees are actually employed there. And if we do that, we can't do it without at least having at the bare minimum their name and their address.
So, Mr. McCoy, if I can clarify, are you suggesting that it's okay to allow them to put the name and address in, but not have their social security numbers there? I mean, I think that may be the sensitive information. I don't know.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. But I definitely want the social security number for the actual principal person.
For the entity, for the EIN, and also for the person who's actually receiving the money. You want that, but
you're in the social, because here's why. If for some reason they can't, at the end of that period, that 1-year period, validate that they had those expenses incurred for legitimate expenses within the criteria that we set, they owe us $5,000. Well, how do we go about collecting $5,000 if we never even got their social security number in the first place? And all we have is an EIN number. Because at the very minimum, we should be able to issue a 1099-C and include it in their income if we don't recoup our funds, if they can't validate that these are legitimate expenses. And I mean, that's just very basic.
All right. Does anyone object to having that particular line stricken from the application where it says on page 5, loan applicants may redact sensitive information? I want to try to get us to consensus about some of these topics like home businesses, childcare, and so on. So let's, Ms. Lanier, and oh, no, I'm sorry, Ms. Miller Anderson.
My comment regarding the home-based daycare. So for this particular program, it's mainly to support payroll and utilities and inventory purchases. So with the home, I think Mr. McCoy was spot on saying that if we're going to include them, just include everybody, not to just set aside different monies for them. But the thing about the home-based daycares, they're only allowed to have so many kids within their home. And so that does not provide them with, usually they don't have a large amount of staff. You might have maybe one or two people that may help you out, but it's not a large amount of staff. So I just want to say that in regards to the home daycares, it's not like your typical daycares. You wouldn't have as many employees. So for that part, but I agree with it. Do we know how many businesses we actually have in the brick and mortar? You said no?
We estimated at least 50. I can't give you an exact number, but 50 to 75, I would say.
I mean, I do think the point about their rent being paid, because I know in some other plazas where there are businesses, they are providing them with like 2 or 3 months free of rent. I think that is a great relief. So if we could include rent as one of the funding assistance topics, we could probably be able to hit quite a few of those businesses in their area. And I think for that overhead, at least they wouldn't have to worry about that. I really would like to see it just be with the brick and mortar. And I'm actually someone that had a home-based business, so I understand that. But there's a lot of things you don't have to deal with in a home-based business than you would with having the brick and mortar. So being that it's not a whole lot of money, I would think a little bit could go towards the rent, or I mean, you know what I'm saying, they would probably utilize it for the rent or payroll.
Thank you.
So I would like to stay there.
Madam Chair.
Can I just get a thumbs up from everybody? Let's do the rent first. How many people think that rent should be included?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Haygood.
On the record, there is the other programs that we have looked at where rent subsidies were provided were city programs. They were using more general funds and some other funds other than CRA funds. We tried to make a nexus, and I guess, there's no case law on this, but certainly there are more restrictions on use of the CRA funds than would be on the city using other funds. And again, under the Boynton Beach program, and I think we also like the city of West Palm. I can't say that for certain, but Boynton does not provide rent or mortgage payments. It's safer, I would say, to provide these funds to cover the things that we have said we've suggested to you to be covered.
Mr. Haygood, could you do some more investigation and see if that's the case? It seems to me like there's consensus. Mr. Lawson and Ms. Lanier, I think McCoy said rent, yes, and Miller Anderson said rent. Would you, if Mr. Haygood determines that it's appropriate and legal for us to include rent as one of the categories, would you say yes? Just give me a thumbs up or down.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Haygood, if you would just look into that for us, because it seems like that's something we want. Can we just finish the issue of home-based businesses? It looks like Mr. McCoy and Ms. Miller Anderson would be opposed to making a separate distinction for home-based businesses. Mr. Lawson, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm in agreement that just including the home-based business. I actually prefer to leave them out completely, but I don't mind including them to give them an opportunity, because I just know that the overhead, the staffing, and the cost for these brick and mortars is pretty substantial compared to the minimal staff that the home-based business has. And they're still suffering as well, but maybe we can look at something else down the road for some of these home-based businesses.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Haygood, would you make that a part of, that it's not going to be a separate, we won't have a separate category for home-based businesses. There'll be one. Mayor Felder, did you have a comment?
But you do want us to add as eligible business.
Yes, an eligible business, but without making it a separate category. Mayor Felder.
That's what I was going to ask for the home-based businesses, where they're going to be included, in the overall. You just answer that. Because some home-based businesses, like Councilwoman Lanier was saying, is if you have a home-based daycare and you don't have kids, that means you're not having money coming in. So you can't afford your mortgage, light bill, water bill, because that's your business.
Right.
So as long as they're included, I'm good with that.
Okay. Anything else for the good of this before we call the question? Mr. McCoy, yes.
Commissioner, Chair Botel, may I ask a question before you take a vote? Just for clarification. Commissioner McCoy mentioned massage parlors. Did you want to add massage parlors to eligible business?
Ms. Miller Anderson has a comment.
I would prefer to stay away from the ones that are listed as specifically as massage parlors. To Mr. McCoy's point about some of the hair salons doing it. Now, I guess, Mr. McCoy, question to you is, the ones that are like that, are they listed as their business tax receipt says hair salon, or does it beauty salon, or whatever, or does it say massage parlor?
Well,
Because that would be is that the main business?
Well, it depends, because you can rent a barbershop and somebody can do nails. You can rent a hair salon and there's an esthetician that's in the back. So, and then it says massage/personal services. So I'm not sure. I don't want to exclude anybody, because what I don't see on here is, as eligible businesses, is specifically called out is barbershops and beauty salons. Oh,
It's on there. Yeah, it's on there.
It's on there. Yeah.
I see it.
They're on there.
I'm thinking if it's in the barbershop or the hair salon, that's probably the main business. I know that obviously my mom has a hair salon, so there are different people that rent out chairs or whatever. But a massage parlor, I'm thinking that's the only thing you do. And I would imagine the reason why is because of what we know. It's just got a bad name over time. I would imagine that's why, unless Mr. Haygood is aware of it specifically, why that one would be called out.
Well, the only thing I could say, and I don't know, is that they're talking about massage parlors, not,
I know.
serving.
Right. Kind of go along with that other one, the adult. Yeah. So I'm fine with it staying written as that is written, with understanding if it's a hair salon and they have, someone there doing massages or eyebrows, and that would still qualify the business.
Right, which brings one last concern. We are doing this for the principal that actually has the BTR and not any subs underneath.
Right.
So they have a chair that they're leasing out. The leasing is not.
No.
Okay, good. And I'm okay with that. I just wanted to have the conversation because I know that they're specifically one that I know of in the CRA. And, I guess she's a standalone. So I guess she's standing alone.
So Mr. Haygood, do you have any other questions for the council or the commission? Or Ms. Jenkins or Mr. Evans?
No, if I just we have to make sure we got all the changes. Mr. Haygood will determine if rent is an eligible expense.
Yes.
We will add a personal guarantee, and we're going to add as an eligible business, home-based businesses.
Yes. They are now specifically called out as ineligible, so you'll have to strike them from the ineligible category and move them to eligible. Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
I have another question. Are we going to include marinas? Because Mr. McCoy suggested not including the businesses in the marina.
Oh, thank you for reminding us of that. How do we feel about that? A thumbs up if you want to let's see, what's the best way to phrase
Now,
this?
Madam
Ms.
Chair.
Miller Anderson, sure, Miller Anderson.
I think with Mr. McCoy's point that we already provided some relief to them, I don't see including them in this particular go round here of funds.
I agree. Anybody disagree?
I'm in agreement with that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we're in agreement that they will not be eligible. Thank you for reminding us.
And
Okay,
as
Madam
to
Clerk?
the,
Yes.
one other thing, it was mentioned about the redacting the information, so we're gonna clarify that they don't have to provide the social security for their employees, but they must provide the name
Yes,
of their person who works there.
yes. Okay, are we good? We're good. Madam Clerk, call the roll. Call the,
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lawson,
Yes.
Chair Botel.
yes,
That motion carries with all the changes made.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Okay, item 2.
Selection and approval of search firm, job description, and salary range for CRA Executive Director.
Mr. Haygood?
Yes, ma'am. At the last meeting, the board asked me to address 3 tasks in regards to the ED search. The first one was to ask Ms. Dickerson, who was nice enough to join us. I know she has a busy schedule with some items on your other agenda tonight, for a recommendation of one of the 2 firms identified by the board. And the second was, what were the procedures used in 2017 for the last manager search? I am going to defer to Ms. Dickerson because I was only going to be able to, I thought she was here.
I see her on there. Thank you, Ms.
I am
Dickerson.
here.
She's
Good
here.
evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. To answer that specific question, the actual process that was used with the city manager search was through the executive search firm. I do have Ms. Young here with me that can give a little bit of insight, but in general, the executive search firms, they have their own models and phases that they pretty much tout as being one of the best. So there are general techniques and processes that are consistent across the search firms, but in terms of timelines, that's where they vary or where they say they specialize. But Ms. Young is here to add a little bit of insight.
Thank you. Ms. Young?
She has to come closer.
Oh, okay.
Executive search firm for city manager.
Good evening, everyone. The executive search firm for the city manager back in, well, I think it was 2017. Can you all hear me all, first of all?
Yes, yes.
So that firm, they were, as Ms. Dickerson was saying, they set the criteria of for the selection process. They do all of the vetting. They set the interview models up. Those types of services. That's what they provide as part of their services in their selection criteria.
Mm-hmm. Madam Chair, would you like for me to highlight the 2 firms that you all the final 2?
Yes, I think that would be nice. Thank you.
Okay. So as you know, there are the 2 firms. One is GovHR and the other is CPSHR. In terms of the timeline, and I'll talk about the phases, GovHR will execute their process within 12 weeks. So there are several phases. The first one entails like interviews, brochure development, and that's after the discussion. Say, for example, it would be hiring manager, or in this case, the council or the board. Phase 2 would be for weeks 3 to 6, That would be advertising, putting the position out, doing some outreach, candidate recruitment. A lot of the firms, and I'll mention this in the other, they have databases already because this is what they typically do. So there may be a number of candidates that fit what you're looking for, and they would just do specific outreach. In week 7 and 8, that's phase 3, they would go through the candidate evaluation and background screening. So a lot of the vetting would be done before you ever saw names and recommended candidates. So in phase 4, which is week 9, they would present the recommended candidates to you, and you can be assured that they've already been vetted at some level. Most of the firms have a second level as well. So GovHR, the phase 5 is the interview process and additional background screening. So I have checked for you, and both of them have video capability and leveraging technology. In the wake of the pandemic, just want to make sure that we do that in a conscious manner. And one firm, the next one I'll discuss, actually had
Madam Chair, Madam
Yes,
Chair, can I just ask a question about this particular one before she moves to the next one?
sure.
For the, when they start narrowing down the applications, is it set how many we would like to see? Because I know with the other, when we did the city manager, we had to narrow down, like give our top 3 of some sort. Will we have any interaction with that, or will they just be presenting us like their top 3?
very
How
good
is that defined?
Very good question, Councilperson Miller Anderson. I believe the initial stage is where you all can set the expectation. That is where you can make the request known. We don't want you to narrow it down to 4 candidates. We want to see a complement of 5. You might want to see 7, but that would be in the initial stage in setting the process for going forward. And I believe that would be your differentiator because looking at them in juxtaposition, they're pretty much equal. It just depends on those nuances and what these search firms can provide to satisfy you all.
Okay,
And-
thank you.
Thank you.
So the last stage, of course, would be the appointment of the candidate. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that the search firm would do all of the heavy lifting for you, all of the heavy lifting for you. And that was GovHR. And so similarly, CPS HR has, looks like 14 weeks in comparison to GovHR's 12 weeks. It doesn't really indicate that one is better over the other, but that is their specific model. So what happens in several weeks, it goes about 14 weeks. So there's the initial meeting, which would be part of the other group, the other firm as well. They do a draft brochure as well. The brochure gets approved. So you're engaged along the way, and there are decision points for you. So they're not just doing your bidding without having checkpoints. And before, in the initial stage, you could actually basically specify how frequently you want to be engaged, so you could be making some sound decisions along the way and not having just an outside firm really drive this decision. So there's the aggressive recruiting. They like to, I guess, brand for themselves. They do the final filing, preliminary screening. They present leading candidates. Again, I believe you can have your voice in saying how many you want. They assist with the interviews, from the questions, and that stems back to the initial meeting where they want to understand the scope of what you're looking for, the knowledge, skills, and abilities. And then there are interviews and reference and background checks. And then, of course, final interviews and appointment. So the process is about the same. They have different phases, but the concepts within the search firm process is pretty much identical.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Would you recommend that we interview these 2 firms and have them present to us, or how would you recommend we make a decision regarding which firm is best? Do you have a preference? Do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I thank you, Madam Chair and Council. My recommendation is definitely that you interview the one who's going to be the interviewer on your behalf, because in that conversation or dialogue, you get the nuances between each agency. I can tell you from a high level, my assessment. I have gone as far as to look at some of the placements to give you a little bit more insight. So Gov HR tends to be a little bit more penetrated across the country. So there are a lot of companies that are represented, not companies, a lot of states represented in their proposal. Um, CPS HR is very similar, but in comparison, there are a number of Florida government agencies identified for Gov HR, and they actually took time to give you a reference sheet.
So,
And
yeah.
yes, and so they have identified placements for redevelopment director in 2017. They did placement of a CEO in Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council, which I think is relevant, and also an executive director for a redevelopment agency in Connecticut. And while they're out of state, I believe they were trying to identify relative agencies that can give them a reference for the success in their process. But then I will share that CPS HR has also made placements for the city of Tampa in Florida, and also city of University City in Missouri, and city of Bozeman. So they had a city manager placement. They had I'll wrap it up. That placement of Keynote was recently in 2020 during the midst of the COVID pandemic. So they made a point of saying that they successfully recruited remotely using their innovative tools and strategies. I have no doubt that the other firm has that capability, but for me, past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So it's really a tie in terms of the ability to deliver. Cost is a difference. $20,000 for GovUSA, but it does exclude some add-ons. Of course, travel and accommodations would be excluded should that be necessary. And CPS HR is a flat 25,000, excluding travel and accommodation.
So they're pretty much the same price. It's what the ones we like best. One last question from me, and then I'll ask council to, will they do an analysis of similar CRAs and give us a comparable salary range? Is that something that could be part of their service to us so that we know about what ballpark we should be in terms of salary?
I believe it's doable. I don't know if that's an additional fee, but given their database, they should have some data, and I could try to support you with that as well by doing some type of reach out to my professional organization to see if we can gather that data as we would a salary for regular positions.
That would be very helpful. Mr. Haygood has a comment. Mr. Haygood?
Yes, ma'am. We did, Tamara did a search of the CRAs within the county. So we have their salary range. We did not go outside of the county.
Okay. That's not in the backup though, is it? I didn't see it.
Yeah, we just got this today.
Okay. So what Ms. Dickerson is suggesting is that we invite these two firms in and give them face-to-face or screen-to-screen rather, a screen-to-screen meeting with them, and then we'll make a decision. Is that okay with everybody? Any other questions? Mr. McCoy, I can see you shaking your head there.
Okay. I'm just trying to get some understanding of what we'll be expecting to come out of that we didn't already do, because that's going to create another meeting. And by gosh, these aren't even the candidates. So, I mean, it's almost like, I don't know. it's almost like, in my opinion, like the old school days before the internet, which newspaper publication you want to put your help wanted ad in, Sun Sentinel or the Palm Beach Post. So I don't know if I want to spend another go-to meeting to talk to two search firms that have a reputation for already doing this. And
Do you have a preference then?
well, my preference was Gov USA,
Okay.
Gov HR USA, but
Right.
that's just me, just
Okay.
based on what I've seen in the proposal.
All right, let me hear from, I forget who raised their hand. It's hard to remember who raised. Miss Miller Anderson, did you have a statement? No. Miss Lanier,
I mean,
see
I
your
did-
hand. And then
I,
Mr.
you can
Lawson.
go to them first. I didn't raise my hand, but I do have a
Okay,
statement.
sorry. Lanier, Lawson, Anderson. Go ahead.
This information that is being brought to us from the HR department, I wanted to ask Ms. Dickerson, what was the last executive staff recruitment that the HR department did for the city?
Would have been.
No, I'm asking her.
I'm trying to remember. Ms. Dickerson?
Yes. Councilperson Lanier, just
Yes, ma'am.
for clarification, are you referring to the last executive position that the HR team actually conducted the search for?
Yes.
Do you know?
Purchasing? I have a clarification if
Are
I
you
could,
referring
Ms.
to
Lanier.
director?
Can I
Yeah.
speak with Ms. Dickerson?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand your question. I think she is too.
I'm asking her this question because I have a follow-up question to also ask her.
But she doesn't understand your question. Could you rephrase it, please?
The question is, when is the last, what was the last position and with the executive staff that her team was a part of?
The last executive position, it was the end of the police chief search. When I joined, that's when I started participating. There was, we've had director positions, but some of those positions were actually managed out of city administration. So we haven't holistically done one yet since I've been here.
Okay, and the reason why I was asking that because I wanted to know the difference between what this search firm is doing and what the city's HR is doing, and what will be the difference?
Yes, that's a valid question. The executive search firms have deeper roots because they do this on a regular basis. They often do not even have to reach very far. Again, they leverage their networking, they leverage their database, and they have the ability as well for outreach when they're attending national conferences on a regular basis. That's kind of how they build their database. So with that, they have a ready set of candidates, but they also have the connections with all of the organizations and associations that are specific. Each time we would do it, we have to like start from square one, basically, and they maintain it on a regular basis.
Yeah, and the reason why I was asking is that the city has been in business, we can say at least for the last 40 years, and we've hired city managers, we've hired police chiefs, we've hired. So I thought that we would be experts as well in terms of how to hire people for our city, but apparently not. That's my question.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson, and then Ms. Miller Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a recommendation that we move forward with Gov HR US. My points after reviewing both proposals was the time frame that they outlined in Gov HR, the 120-day timeline. I did appreciate that, and also the cost as well. A little bit less with the travel, depending on the number of candidates, equate to about the same. So just the timeline they outlined, I say we go forward with Gov HR US and proceed.
Thank you. Ms.
Thank
Miller
you.
Anderson. Thank you.
I'm in support of utilizing Gulf as well, but Ms. Dickerson did point it out correctly. The point of having a headhunter is the fact that they have a database of people. They have, these are people who are kind of running in the same circle. And so we would get more of an advantage of finding someone far and wide versus utilizing just our HR and just posting it on a job advertisement. on the website and having people just look for it. So I'm in support of that, and kind of takes it out of our hands for the
Our
most
hands.
part, but not totally.
Okay, Ms. Lanier, and then we'll.
Yeah,
call
and
question.
I just wanted to close with the fact that, I just think that it's a waste of money that the city, and it appears that the council really does not have any confidence in the HR department in terms of pulling this off. So that may be the issue here. So we will move forward with this search firm for Gov HR USA.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, I'm not sure that it's that we don't have confidence. It's that we would like the search to be conducted by somebody who has this pool of candidates at the ready and has the knowledge and background in hiring this kind of a position. So I don't want Ms. Dickerson to go away thinking that we don't trust her to do this. So I hope that,
And I think that's what
don't think
our
that,
department, our HR department is supposed to be doing anyway.
yeah. Okay, so I think we're ready to call the question, Madam Clerk. And the motion, can we make a motion then can someone make a motion, please, to go with hiring Gov HR as our search firm? Is that the motion you need, Mr. Haygood? Okay. Can someone make that motion? Can I get a second, please?
I'll bring a contract back to you at your next meeting to sign. In the meantime, we'll start talking with them, getting things.
Thank you. Can someone make a motion?
Move to hire Gov HR as the search firm for the executive director's search position.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Lanier,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lawson,
Yes.
Chair Botel.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments, Madam Chair, Madam Clerk?
There are no public comments.
Thank you. Do we have a report from the Executive Director?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Report from General Counsel, Mr. Haygood?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Discussion by the board, anything, or shall we move along to our next meeting? Raise your hand if you want to say something. Okay,
Go ahead,
good.
raise your hand.
Mr. Lawson doesn't want to say anything. This meeting is adjourned, and I think we have to leave this meeting and go to our next meeting, which is now 12 minutes late. So let's disconnect from this one, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.